Hello again, everyone. Welcome back. We're really glad to have the co-authors of a new book here with us, Charlotte Jones Voiklis, who is the granddaughter of Madeleine and Jennifer Adams. And Charlotte and I have actually worked together before at a Madeleine conference that was one of the last, I think maybe the last in-person conference that I did before the pandemic. It was in November of 2019, right, Charlotte?
Yeah.
In New York City, near where Madeleine lived. And, it's just a fantastic event with all kinds of wonderful people. And Charlotte, maybe just as a side note, Olga Masola is part of this conference.
Right. I saw that. I saw that Demi was with you guys.
And she had been part of the conference that we did in New York. So in any event, it's great to reconnect. As usual, everyone, feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom portal to ask any questions, or you can type them into the chat box and I'll relay those to Charlotte and Jennifer. So maybe the two of you could start off just kind of introducing yourselves and tell us a little bit about your backgrounds.
Sure. I'm actually going to introduce Jen, and she's going to introduce me because it's uncomfortable sometimes talking about yourself. So, so Jen is the author of more than 50 books, including the best-selling Baby Lit board book series that introduces young kids to classic works of literature. And she's written a host of other books as well. She is also an editor. She handles the children's list at Sounds True. Let's see. She also recently completed an MFA in children's. I don't know
we say writing for children and young adults, which is cool.
Writing for children and young adults at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. She is also a bookseller herself because she works at her local bookstore, and she loves other people's cats.
I do.
And Dr. Pepper and her husband Bill.
That is such a good introduction. It captures all the important things. And so I'm going to introduce Charlotte. Charlotte is Madeleine's granddaughter, and she lived with her through college and graduate school and helped her answer all of her letters. I was really interested to learn that Madeleine L'Engle personally answered every single letter she got, which I think is amazing, and Charlotte helped with that. And she also helped host dinner parties, intergenerational dinner parties with Madeleine's friends and Charlotte's friends. And now she's responsible for her grandmother's literary business and manages that estate. She co-wrote Becoming Madeleine with her sister, Lena, and she co-wrote A Book Too Can Be a Star with Me. Charlotte has a PhD in comparative literature, and she's done all sorts of important work, I think, teaching, fundraising, communications, and grant making. She has also volunteered in the New York court system as a mediator, and she lives in New York and Connecticut with her husband and her two grown children. I got to stay with them recently. Her son Costa and his partner are doing organic farming on the land in Connecticut, and the whole family is amazing cooks, I have to say, and hosted and treated me very well. And there's also some exciting news about an upcoming musical, but I think I'll let Charlotte talk about that.
Great. And we can get into, thank you, Jen, for that lovely introduction as well. And we'll just jump into talking about how this book came to be. I'm hoping that you guys have some good questions for us too, because I find that like sometimes just talking to a screen, we want to know sort of what you guys are interested in knowing about what's going on. So I first met Jen at the DMV which might not seem an auspicious beginning to a relationship, but indeed it was. This was about 15 years ago. And I was with my mom for some reason at the DMV. She was getting some kind of license, and it was very boring sitting in the waiting room. But there was another mother with a young child reading a board book. And I was captivated by the words and by the pictures because I was spying over the head. And it happened to be Jen's Pride and Prejudice baby lit book, which again, Jen, you will correct me if I get this wrong because I seem to change the words every time I talk about it. But it's like one quaint village, 2 eligible bachelors, 3 stately homes, 5 sisters. And it's just it was such a clever and accessible, sparse telling of a complicated story. So I thought it was brilliant, and I had that in the back of my mind. And sort of fast forward several years later, one of my grandmother's former assistants said to me while she was visiting me in New York, she said, there should be a picture book biography of Madeleine. And as soon as she said that, an image popped into my head of my grandmother's first memory, which was of being woken up as a young child and being taken outside to look at the stars while she was at her own grandmother's house on the beach. And I thought that is how it has to begin, with the stars. And so I promptly wrote a draft and I showed it to the editor that I had worked with and who had worked with Madeleine at FSG. And I was not, I have to say, given a lot of encouragement. And this was sort of about the time that the movie they knew that it was being worked on and was going to come out. And they sort of said, the picture book idea, maybe later, but we'd really like a middle grade biography to go along with the movie. So my sister and I turned to that, which was a lot of fun to collaborate with her on that. But I never sort of lost the idea of this picture book. And then on book tour for Becoming Madeleine, Lena and I were at an independent bookstore in Montrose, California. And I saw, once again, sort of Jen's Baby Lit series in the store. And I saw that they had all been signed. And I was very excited. So I promptly bought all of their stock of Jen's signed books. And I told the bookseller that I would really love to be put in touch with Jennifer because I had an idea for a project. And then Jen can take the rest of the story.
Yes, this is my favorite story. So I always tell everyone, I always visit every independent bookstore when I'm traveling, just as a habit, and it's so fun. And this is the time that it paid off in a really interesting way. So I also, about 2 weeks after Charlotte was at Once Upon a Time in LA, I went and I saw her book because she'd just been there, and I saw her signed copies, and I was talking to the owner, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And she was like, oh my gosh, I forgot. I was supposed to introduce you. And then right then, speaking of loving other people's cats, the cat that lives at that bookstore is Pippi. And Pippi ran out into the street, into this busy street. And the owner was like, oh no, Pippi, and ran out after her. And I thought that was the end of that. I didn't know what was happening or what I'd missed. But I always tell everyone Pippi was okay. She got her and brought her back in. And then she said, oh, yeah, Charlotte wanted to meet you, and I was going to introduce you. And I thought, oh, wow, I didn't think that would actually come to be, but Maureen wrote this lovely introductory email, and that's how Charlotte and I connected and started talking about the project. So.
Yeah, so we exchanged emails at first and met in person because Jen, for her job as an editor with Sounds True, used to have to come to New York
Needs to get to come to New York.
As a quarter. And I gave her my, my first draft of the story. And we just started going back and forth on what that would look like. And it changed a lot because Jen is, a wonderful writer and a really gifted editor. So I think this was your first time collaborating with someone. So I think, why don't you talk a little bit about?
Yeah. In fact, I was a little nervous because I've just heard from other writers, how it maybe isn't always fun or doesn't always work out to collaborate with someone, and I'd never done it. And in fact, it was just this lovely, pleasant experience. And I remember a year or so in saying to Charlotte, I keep waiting for this to be hard or waiting for this to be bad, but not going with so far. It was just actually really fun. And we had a Google document and we would ask each other questions. And then, Charlotte would say, like she mentioned the stars, like she wanted that to be the theme. And we kind of figured out how to work that in better. Sometimes Charlotte would you sent me some journal entries from your grandmother talking about that and things like that helped me feel like get to know Madeleine better. And I have to say our editor too, Grace Kendall, was, we had a really good call with her, and she really got the vision of the book, what it should be doing, what the themes were. And that's always fantastic. I feel like she guided it with a deft hand too. So collaboratively, it was really great.
And then one of the things that I found, and I still find a little strange about children's book and picture books, is that, we didn't have an illustrator until the text was complete, which is still strange to me. I mean, I think it worked out really, really well. But because, as you know, like a good picture book, the pictures and the words complement each other. So it didn't feel right to me that, oh, here's the words and then here's the illustrations and then hope they work. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more. I mean, there was some back and forth with the illustrator too. But in my imagination, it would have made sense to work directly with an illustrator early on. But that's not how it's done.
Yeah. And I will say, putting on my editor hat, I will advocate forever and ever that the reason we do it that way, it's the right way to do it, because you get an author and they're like, my best friend is an illustrator and they do these great pictures and they're horrible, and you don't want to hurt the author's feelings. Or a lot of times you're like husband and wife team and you're like, oh no, because you love the text but you don't love the art. Or sometimes you love the art but the person can't write, and then you can't tell them that. So we separate it on purpose, very, very intentionally. And the other thing is, like, really, what I love about picture books is like half is the writing and half is the art. But then when they come together, it's way more than two halves. It becomes something magical and more. So you really have to give the illustrator their freedom to do their creative work. And if you're too prescriptive in what you tell them you want to draw, you end up missing on all this wonderful stuff that you wouldn't know otherwise. But it's a real act of faith to let your words go and let people do what they're good at. And if you have a really good editor, they'll manage that well and let you have a say. And we did have a chance to review both the sketches and the final art, and maybe you can talk a little bit about some of those details, Charlotte.
Yeah. So once the text was set, and we were also consulted on finding the artist. And one thing Jen and I agreed on, and we're clear from the beginning, that we wanted an illustrator who felt like that these were drawings and not sort of computer generated cartoons, which it feels like a lot of picture books really look quite graphical and not painted or drawn. And I think Adelina, the illustrator, uses a computer because that's what everybody uses, a computer now. But it still feels like a painting. So we were really happy once she was selected. And I mean, I think it's true what Jen said, that with a gifted illustrator, they are going to bring their own creativity, which is only going to enhance the words. But there were things that we were able to, ask for little details to be added. So I sent a lot of reference photos from our family archive, and also just like, this is what New York City looked like in 1960. So she paid really careful attention to that, and little things like the first draft, everyone's smiling very largely. And I know why for a kid's book, you want it to feel inviting and happy stories. But I think part of what was important to, I'll say, us in this was that it be really relatable and not so like everything's fine, kids are happy all the time, because kids aren't happy all the time, and life can be hard, and kids know this. So and Madeleine wasn't happy all the time at all either. So sort of asking for like her mother playing there's a spread here. Let me show you. There's a spread of the family together, sort of working. Father's at his desk. Madeleine is in a chair, and Mother is playing the piano. And at first, Mother has had a huge smile on her face. But part of the text is that, when her mother felt upset, she would play the piano. And so we wanted that to be reflected in the pictures, and little things like, her father, and sometimes the pictures have little Easter eggs or things that grown-ups might pick up on that aren't necessarily for kids. So her father drank a lot, and that was an issue in his death. And so we asked for a picture of a whiskey bottle there. That's not something that a child would necessarily need explaining, but a parent might understand. And then another detail, I know, Jen, what you want to talk about this picture? This is your favorite.
Oh yeah, the dog is Touche, the poodle, was in the play, and Madeleine was in charge of getting Touche to and from the play. But dogs weren't allowed on the subway, so Touche would pretend like she was a fur stole and play dead on her neck, and that's how she got her on the subway. So, but we just put, no dogs allowed on the sign, so kids can find, on reading and rereading. It's fun when they can find little additional details, and kids are really, it's amazing when you hear picture book writers talk about kids reading their books. Sometimes they'll find stuff that you didn't even put in there, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a really perceptive way to interpret that illustration. Kids are way smarter than grown-ups and very good readers. And you asked to have, she wore a crucifix. You asked to have that put in, which I really like. Just like a detail like that, reflecting her Christianity that isn't necessarily talked about in the text, but it's important to who she is.
Yeah, and a little detail like we made sure that, so in the bookstore scene, A Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats won the Caldecott the same year that A Wrinkle in Time won the Newbery. So that detail is in that photograph. Riverside Drive looks like Riverside Drive. Her house looks like her house. So it was really special to see those details be added and come to life in the picture book. So, yeah.
So maybe one of the things we should have said at the beginning is the title of the book. which is a book too can be a star, the story of Madeleine L'Engle on the making of A Wrinkle in Time. So
Thank you, Brian.
Is it literally about the making of that book?
It's okay. So this is about children's publishing, right? So that was asked. The publisher asked to include that because of metadata and discoverability. So I mean, it is about A Wrinkle in Time, in that it's really about her connection to the stars and how that first vision when she was a child helped her know that she was connected to something beautiful, generous, and loving, and that was always her touchstone when her faith was shook or she wasn't sure what her next steps were, that she could go and look at the stars and be reminded that she was part of something. And A Wrinkle in Time, the writing of that book came after, what she would say were years of rejection. She did have 3 books published in that decade, which is pretty good, I think. But it felt to her that she couldn't get, that publishers were rejecting her work, and they had been living in the country. And when they decided, basically because my grandfather decided that he wanted to act again, they made a very scary decision for the family, which was to leave the security of their life in Connecticut and move back to New York and hope that he got work. For that transition, they drove across the country and back as a way to, have a time between Connecticut and New York. And it was during that trip that the names Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which, who are characters from A Wrinkle in Time, pops into her head in the sort of mysterious landscape of the Painted Desert. So yes, it's about a wrinkle in time, but it's not. It's deeper than that. It's about her connection to the stars and how she kept her faith that she was part of something.
Yeah, I think it's important to know, like, for a book publisher, for sales and marketing, they're like, a lot of people might not recognize the name Madeleine L'Engle, but totally know the book A Wrinkle in Time. I mean, we do, because we can't imagine, everyone doesn't know that, it's a household name for us, but as a mass market thing, it would be able to appeal to like a person that pick it up and be like, oh, I know A Wrinkle in Time. Oh, it's about her. And also just that title itself, I don't know if we mentioned, you probably know, is from her Newbery acceptance speech. A book too can be a star. And we have that as the frontispiece of the book. It's well, I'll read it to you. I have the book here too. I think it's such a beautiful, inspiring thing that she said. A book too can be a star, explosive material capable of stirring up fresh life endlessly, a living fire to lighten the darkness, leading out into the expanding universe. So that kind of is the opening page of our book, and sets the tone of what we're talking about with creativity, whether it's books or writing or painting or music, the importance of putting your story out into the world to kind of, put a light in the darkness.
Yeah, and that the full speech is available on the website. I'm just like, oh, maybe I can put a link to that in the chat. We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll see if I can do that. Wow.
And so I'm sorry I don't remember this, but what's the release date for the book?
Oh, it came out October 4th.
October 4th. Okay, good.
Yeah. So
and there's also a movie. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in 20, all right, I'm going to do this later. I can't talk and look for it.
I'm sorry.
You talk and I'll type.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's also a play. I think I'm confusing the two. Is the play just come out?
So
there are lots of adaptations of A Wrinkle in Time. So first there's a graphic novel adaptation. There's the 2018 Disney movie directed by Ava DuVernay. There was a or a 2000 and I'm going to get the dates wrong. So 3 ABC television miniseries. There are at least 6 play adaptations that are available for license now, but plus there have been others that because even though like the movie rights had been tied up since 1979, so a really long time, the theatrical rights for schools and community theaters, it was really important to her to retain those rights so that schools and communities could have their own interpretation and engagement with the story, which is, retaining those rights was kind of unusual. It's kind of unusual. But that was something she really believed in. And then excitingly, recently we announced that a big musical is in development.
Oh, it's in development. Okay.
It's in development. So I'm actually in New York right now because we're in the middle of a 2-week workshop with real actors learning the music and singing. I mean, it's a long process, so I can't tell you when when it will be produced and people will be able to buy tickets and go see it. But it's very exciting with some really wonderful artists who are involved. I'm very proud of that. So, yeah.
So what questions do other folks have that you want to find out from Charlotte and Jennifer? I know you have to have some Madeleine language.
Don't be shy.
I don't know that it's a question. I do have one just to say that thank you for keeping her story and who she is alive. And well, I'll be 50 this year. And one of the things that I carry around with me is this. And it is a signed book of the Swiftly Tilting Planet for Roger. And she says Ananda. And I love that. And I always have loved that. And it just is one of the things that sort of my top 5 special things that I carry with me since I'm an author, children's book author. And I actually met her at Canuga and in Hendersonville when I was, maybe 15 years old. And I just remember her kind of moo-moo outfit. And there's so much I remembered about her. And I carry that with me. I just wanted to share.
That's so nice. I love, her, she was, for those of you who don't know, she was very tall. She was
very tall.
And she wore big dresses, muumuus.
Yeah.
And actually, before the book came out and before Jen and I did several events, she came to visit us in Connecticut. So we still have the house that my mother grew up in where she wrote a Wrinkle in Time. Very lucky. And Jen came and stayed a few days there and participated in an in-person Circle of Quiet writing retreat at a location sort of close to Crosswicks. And one of the attendees there who I had met, again, several years ago at another artist retreat, she had told me that she was a quilter. And then when in March 2020, when my family and I were like, okay, we're going to go to Connecticut for like 8 weeks. It's not going to last longer than 8 weeks, right? We'll just be there for 8 weeks. I found more of her dresses still there. And I sent one of them to Jen Nielsen, who created this beautiful quilt out of the dress. So I really love, I love my grandmother. We have a lot of her things. I don't like, the house isn't a museum. It's a place where we all live and have our lives. And it's actually really fun for me to find ways to repurpose and enliven things. So when I found the dress, I was like, I don't want to like, oh, here's the dress. We're just going to have her dress. Like, what do you do with a dress? So making a quilt out of it was a lot of fun. Several years ago, the curtains that used to hang in her writing room, which we all called her tower, her ivory tower, I had made into journals covers and little books, and I have given them away over the years just to sort of keep things in circulation and have those talismans given to other people who can also extend her life in that way. So that was super fun.
Thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for joining us to tell us about the new book, about the play that's coming out, everything else. Charlotte has done a ton of different things, along this line of, reinvigorating, reintroducing Madeleine's work. So congratulations on yet another milestone in that, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I wonder if you guys have 30 more seconds.
Sure.
Jen, do you want to talk about the book you're working on or anything?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Yes, my new picture book is coming out in the spring. It's called All's Right with the World, and it's a retelling of the poem by Robert Browning. And it kind of goes along with another picture book I have called How Do I Love Thee, which is a retelling of the poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So that's a new picture book I have coming out.
Well, congratulations. That's great. We'll keep our eye out for that too. So thank you all again for a great day. Tomorrow we've got the last day of the conference, so hope you can join us then. Charlotte and Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on the new books.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.